The October wind cut through the bare branches of the old maple trees surrounding St. Catherine's Church, carrying with it the earthy scent of fallen leaves and the first hint of Maine's approaching winter. Liam kicked at a pile of rust-colored leaves as he walked the familiar path behind the weathered stone building, his breath forming small clouds in the crisp air. At 14, he had grown accustomed to spending his afternoons here while his mother finished her custodial work inside the century-old church. Sarah Henderson had been cleaning St. Catherine's for nearly 3 years now, ever since Liam's father left them, with nothing but unpaid bills and broken promises. The job didn't pay much, but Father McKenna was understanding about letting Liam wait around after school, and the work gave Sarah a sense of purpose that had been missing since her world fell apart. "Stay where I can see you," Sarah had called out, as she propped open the heavy wooden door to let in some fresh air while she mopped the nave floors. Her voice carried the same gentle firmness it always did, protective but not overbearing, worn thin by years of shouldering responsibility alone. Liam nodded absently, already distracted by a flash of orange fur darting between the weathered headstones of the small cemetery adjacent to the church. Rusty, the stray cat that had claimed the church grounds as his territory, was stalking something in the tall grass near the back wall of the building. The rear of St. Catherine's was a study in neglect, unlike the well-maintained front entrance with its polished brass fixtures and carefully tended flower beds. The back wall showed decades of weather damage. Ivy crept up the stone facade, and several sections of mortar had crumbled away, leaving gaps between the ancient stones. It was here that the church's history seemed most tangible, in the worn foundation stones that had witnessed over a century of prayers, confessions, and secrets. Liam followed Rusty as the cat squeezed through a particularly large gap in the wall, disappearing from sight. Curious, and with nothing better to do, he approached the opening. What he initially took for a simple gap in the exterior wall revealed itself to be something more interesting. The stones had fallen away to expose what looked like a hollow space within the thick walls themselves. "Rusty?" Liam called softly, crouching down to peer into the darkness. The cat's eyes glowed back at him from somewhere inside the hidden cavity. "Come on, boy. You can't stay in there." He reached his hand into the opening, feeling around the edges of the space. His fingers brushed against something unexpected. Not the rough stone he anticipated, but something smooth and metallic, cool to the touch and definitely man-made. Liam's heart quickened as he carefully worked to widen the opening, pulling away loose stones and crumbling mortar. The October sunlight slanted through the gap, illuminating a small rectangular metal box, no bigger than a shoebox, tucked into what appeared to be a deliberately concealed alcove in the wall. His hands trembled slightly as he extracted the box. It was heavier than expected, made of what looked like tin or steel, with a simple latch that had somehow survived decades without rusting completely. The metal was cold against his palms, and he could feel his pulse hammering in his ears as he carried his discovery to a patch of sunlight near the back steps of the church. "Mom's not going to believe this," he whispered to himself, then louder, "Mom, Mom, come here." Sarah's voice drifted from inside the church, muffled by distance and thick walls. "Liam, what's wrong? Are you hurt?" "No, I'm fine, but you need to see something." The sound of wet mops being hastily stowed and footsteps on hardwood floors preceded Sarah's appearance in the doorway. She wiped her hands on her cleaning apron, her brown hair escaping from its ponytail in the way it always did when she worked. At 36, Sarah still had the kind of natural beauty that turned heads, though she seemed unaware of it, or perhaps had simply stopped caring about such things. "What is it, honey?" she asked, stepping carefully down the back steps in her worn sneakers. Then she saw the box in Liam's hands, and her expression shifted. "Where did you find that?" Liam gestured toward the gap in the wall. "Rusty went in there, and when I reached in after him I found this. It was hidden inside the wall, Mum, like someone put it there on purpose." Sarah approached slowly, her eyes fixed on the metal container. Something in her expression made Liam pause, a flicker of recognition, or perhaps apprehension, that he couldn't quite identify. "We should probably tell Father McKenna," she said quietly, though her voice lacked conviction. "Can't we just look inside first? I mean, it might be nothing. Maybe just old church records or something." Sarah bit her lower lip, a habit Liam recognized as a sign of internal conflict. She reached out and touched the box lightly, as if testing whether it was real. "This wall, it's been like this for years. If someone hid something here, it's been hidden for a very long time." The latch opened with surprising ease, as if it had been designed to be accessed again. Inside, wrapped in what appeared to be oiled cloth that had protected the contents from moisture, were several items that made both Sarah and Liam catch their breath. Photographs, black and white, some color-faded with age. Letters in feminine handwriting tied with a faded ribbon. A brass key, ornate and old-fashioned. And at the bottom a small leather journal, its pages yellowed but intact. Sarah picked up one of the photographs with shaking hands. It showed 5 young women in religious habits, standing in front of St. Catherine's Church. The image was dated 1971 in careful script on the back. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered, and Liam had never heard his mother's voice sound quite like that, hollow, shocked, almost frightened. "Liam, these might be the nuns." "What nuns?" Sarah looked at her son, seeming to realize for the first time that he wouldn't know the story that had haunted this town for 30 years. Her voice was barely above a whisper when she spoke. 5 nuns disappeared from this church in 1972. No one ever found out what happened to them. The case went cold, the convent was closed, and people just stopped talking about it. But everyone who was here then, they remember." Liam stared at the photograph, then at his mother's pale face. "And you think this box belonged to them?" Before Sarah could answer, the sound of a car door slamming in the front parking lot made them both jump. Father McKenna's voice carried around the building as he spoke to someone, Mrs. Dalton from the parish council by the sound of it. "We can't let anyone see this," Sarah said suddenly, her protective instincts kicking in. "Not yet, not until we understand what it means." She began carefully placing the items back into the box, but not before Liam caught a glimpse of one of the letters. The handwriting was urgent, almost desperate, and he could make out fragments of words. "Can't stay silent," and "knows what happened." "Mum, what if this is evidence? What if it explains what happened to them?" Sarah closed the box and held it against her chest, looking around the empty churchyard as if expecting someone to emerge from the shadows. "That's exactly what I'm afraid of, Liam. In a town this small, some secrets stay buried for good reasons." The crunch of footsteps on gravel announced Father McKenna's approach around the side of the building. He was a tall, thin man in his 50s, with prematurely grey hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He had been at St. Catherine's for only 5 years, having come from a larger parish in Portland, and had always struck Liam as genuinely caring, if a bit nervous around people. "Sarah, I thought I heard voices back here," he called out, rounding the corner. His gaze immediately fell on the box in her arms, and something flickered across his features. Surprise, or perhaps something deeper. "What have you found there?" Sarah and Liam exchanged a quick glance. In that moment, a decision was made, though neither could have said exactly why. "Just some old church records that fell out of this damaged wall," Sarah said smoothly. "I was going to ask you what you'd like me to do with them." Father McKenna approached, his eyes never leaving the box. "Old records, you say? May I?" There was something in his tone, too casual, too interested, that made the hair on the back of Liam's neck stand up. His mother must have sensed it too, because she held the box a little tighter. "Of course, Father. I'll bring them to your office on Monday. I should get Liam home. It's getting dark, and I still need to finish the floors inside." Certainly, Father McKenna said, but he made no move to leave. Instead, he walked over to examine the gap in the wall where Liam had made his discovery. "This damage looks recent. We should have this repaired before winter sets in properly." I can ask around for contractors, Sarah offered, already beginning to back toward the front of the building, pulling Liam along with her. That won't be necessary. I'll handle it myself. The priest's voice had taken on a firmness that seemed out of character. In fact, I think it would be best if this area remained off limits for now, for safety reasons, you understand. As they walked to Sarah's old Honda in the front parking lot, Liam couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He glanced back once to see Father McKenna still standing by the damaged wall, his silhouette dark against the gathering dusk. "Mom," Liam said once they were safely in the car, "why didn't you show him what was really in the box?" Sarah started the engine, her hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. "Because, honey, sometimes when you find something that's been hidden for 30 years, you need to be very careful about who you tell. And Father McKenna's reaction just now, it wasn't the reaction of someone who's never seen that box before." As they drove through the quiet streets of their small town, past the hardware store and the diner where everyone knew everyone else's business, Liam looked down at the box now resting on his lap. Whatever secrets lay inside had already begun to change something in his mother, had already shifted the careful balance of their quiet life. He thought about the 5 young women in the photograph, their faces bright with hope and faith, unaware that they would vanish from the world just months after the picture was taken. And for the first time in his life, Liam understood that some stories don't end. They just go underground, waiting for the right moment to surface again. The box seemed to grow heavier in his hands as they drove home through the gathering darkness of the Main evening, carrying with it the weight of 30 years of unanswered questions. The Henderson house sat at the end of Maple Street, a modest 2-story colonial that had seen better days. Peeling white paint and a front porch that sagged slightly on one side told the story of a family stretching to make ends meet. But Sarah kept the interior spotless, and the small living room felt warm, despite the October chill seeping through the old windows. Liam sat cross-legged on the braided rug in front of the coffee table, the metal box open before him like a treasure chest that might contain either gold or dynamite. Sarah had made hot chocolate, her go-to ritual whenever life required serious conversation, and now sat beside him on the worn couch, her hands wrapped around her mug for warmth and comfort. "We'll go through everything carefully," she said, her voice steady, despite the anxiety Liam could see in her eyes. "But Liam, I need you to understand something. What we're doing, it might change things for us here. This town, these people, they've made peace with not knowing what happened. Some of them might not want that peace disturbed." Liam nodded, though he wasn't sure he fully grasped what his mother meant. At 14, he still believed that truth was always better than lies, that justice was worth pursuing regardless of the cost. He would learn otherwise before the night was over. Sarah carefully lifted out the first photograph, the one showing the 5 nuns. In the better light of their living room, more details were visible. The women appeared to be in their 20s and 30s, their faces glowing with the kind of serenity that seemed to radiate genuine faith. Behind them, St. Catherine's Church looked exactly as it did now, the same stone facade, the same arched doorway, the same sense of permanence that made their disappearance all the more jarring. Sister Margaret, Sister Catherine, Sister Rose, Sister Anne and Sister Claire. Sarah read from the careful script on the back. October 1971, God bless these faithful servants. Someone loved them, Liam observed quietly. Whoever wrote this, they cared about these women. Sarah set the photograph aside and reached for the bundle of letters. The ribbon that bound them was faded blue silk, the kind that might have been saved from a wedding dress or a special occasion. As she untied it, the scent of old paper and something faintly floral, perhaps lavender sachets used to preserve the contents, filled the small room. The first letter was addressed simply to M, in the same feminine handwriting they'd noticed earlier. Sarah unfolded it carefully, aware that they might be the first people to read these words in 3 decades. I can't sleep. Every night I see his face and I know he knows that I saw. Sister Catherine thinks we should go to the bishop, but what proof do we have? Our word against his, and who will believe us? The way he looks at me during Mass now, I'm frightened, Em, not just for myself, but for all of us. If he's capable of what I witnessed, what else might he do to keep us quiet? Sarah's hands began to tremble. She looked at Liam, whose young face had gone pale as the implications of the letter sank in. Mom, what do you think she saw? I don't know, honey, but whatever it was, it scared her enough to hide evidence. Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. Let's see what else is here. The second letter was longer, dated 2 weeks later. My dear M, Sister Rose told the others about our conversation. We've decided to document everything, just in case. Sister Anne has been asking questions around town, carefully of course, and what she's learned makes us all sick with worry. It's not just what happened that night behind the rectory. There have been others, Emmy children. Families too, afraid to speak up because of who he is, what he represents to this community. The Mackenzie boy hasn't been the same since his private instruction sessions. Neither has little Mary Flanagan. Their parents suspect, but they don't know how to fight someone who speaks for God in this town. We've sworn an oath of obedience, but doesn't our oath to protect the innocent matter more? Sister Catherine found an address in Boston, someone who helps people in situations like ours. We're going to write to them tomorrow. If something happens to us, Em, make sure people know we tried to do the right thing. The room fell silent except for the tick of the mantel clock and the distant sound of wind rattling the windows. Sarah set the letter down with shaking hands, her face ashen. Liam, I think these nuns discovered that someone in the church was hurting children, and I think they were going to report it, and then they disappeared. Liam's voice cracked slightly. Despite his youth, he understood enough about the world to grasp the terrible implications. Someone made them disappear. Sarah reached for the third letter, but her hands were shaking so badly that Liam gently took it from her. His voice was steady as he read aloud. M, this will likely be my last letter. Father O'Brien knows we've been asking questions. Yesterday he called us into his office one by one and asked us about our loyalty to the church. When it was my turn, he said he'd heard rumors that we were spreading lies about good Catholic families, and that such behavior was not only sinful, but dangerous. The way he said dangerous made my blood run cold. We've decided to leave, Em, all of us together. Sister Catherine has a cousin in Vermont who can help us disappear until we can get to Boston safely. We'll take the evidence with us, the letters from families, the documentation Sister Anne gathered, all of it. By the time you read this, we'll be gone. Don't try to find us. It's not safe for you either. Just know that we tried to do God's work, even when it meant going against God's church. If we don't make it to Vermont, if something happens to us on the way, this box contains everything. Use it wisely. For all of us. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of understanding. Liam looked at his mother, seeing his own shock and horror reflected in her eyes. Father O'Brien, Sarah whispered. That was the priest here before Father McKenna. He died about 10 years ago. Natural causes, they said. But he was the one, Liam said, his voice flat with certainty. He was hurting kids, and the nuns found out, and he couldn't finish the sentence. Sarah pulled her son close, holding him tight against her side. We don't know exactly what happened, but yes, it looks like the nuns were trying to protect children. And someone, maybe Father O'Brien, maybe others, stopped them. Liam pulled away to look at his mother's face. The families in the letters, the Mackenzie boy, Mary Flanagan. Are they still here? Are they still alive? I don't know those names, but that doesn't mean anything. People move away, especially if Sarah trailed off, the implications too terrible to voice completely. They turned their attention to the remaining items in the box. The brass key was ornate and old-fashioned, clearly made for a specific lock. It was heavier than modern keys, with intricate scrollwork on the head and the numbers 1889 engraved on one side. That's the year the church was built, Sarah said, recognizing the date from the cornerstone she cleaned every week. The leather journal was the last item, and perhaps the most crucial. Sister Rose, for the handwriting matched that of the letters, had documented everything methodically. Names, dates, descriptions of suspicious behavior, accounts from families who had confided in the nuns. It read like a criminal case file, built piece by careful piece by women who understood they were risking everything to protect the vulnerable. But it was the final entry that made both Sarah and Liam's blood run cold. March 15th, 1972. Father O'Brien has given us until Sunday to reconsider our position. He says our misunderstandings about certain parishioners could be forgiven if we take vows of silence and accept transfers to a contemplative order where we would have no contact with the outside world. Sister Catherine asked what would happen if we refused. He smiled when he answered, "Then I'm afraid your service to God might end more permanently than any of us would prefer. We leave tomorrow night. If anyone finds this journal, know that we tried to save the children of this parish. We pray our sacrifice won't be in vain." The entry was dated just 2 days before the nun's disappearance was officially reported. Sarah closed the journal and sat back against the couch cushions, looking suddenly older than her 36 years. "Liam, what we've found here, it's not just evidence of what happened 30 years ago. It's proof that this town covered up something horrible. People who are still alive, still living here. They kept quiet while children were hurt, and 5 women were murdered. We have to tell someone," Liam said immediately. "The police, the FBI, someone who can investigate properly." "Tell them what? That we found a box that's been hidden for 30 years? That we broke into church property and stole evidence?" Sarah shook her head. "And even if they believed us, even if they reopened the case, what then? The man who's probably responsible is dead. The families who were hurt might not want their old pain dragged back into the light, and the people who helped cover it up." She gestured toward the window, toward the quiet street where their neighbors lived their ordinary lives. "Some of them are probably still here, Liam. Still going to church every Sunday, still part of this community. What do you think happens to us if we upset that balance?" Liam was quiet for a long moment, processing the complexity of adult fears and compromises that he was only beginning to understand. Finally, he looked up at his mother with a determination that reminded her of herself at his age, before life had taught her to be cautious. "But Mom, what about the kids who were hurt? Don't they deserve to know that someone finally believed them? Don't they deserve justice?" Before Sarah could answer, the phone rang. In the small house, the sound was sharp and startling, making them both jump. Sarah looked at the clock, nearly 10 p.m., too late for casual calls. She answered hesitantly. "Hello? Sarah? It's Father McKenna. I hope I'm not calling too late, but I wanted to check on those old records you found. I've been thinking about them, and I realize they might be more significant than we initially thought. Could you bring them by the rectory tomorrow morning? Early, perhaps? Before services?" Sarah met Liam's eyes, seeing her own apprehension reflected there. "Of course, Father. Is everything all right?" "Oh, yes. Yes, it's just that I've been doing some research of my own tonight, and I think what you found might be related to some old parish business that needs to be handled carefully. Discreetly, you understand." The word discreetly hung in the air like a threat. Sarah forced her voice to remain steady. "I understand completely. I'll see you in the morning." "Wonderful, and Sarah, it might be best if you didn't mention your find to anyone else until we've had a chance to discuss it properly. Some things are better handled within the church family, don't you think?" After she hung up, Sarah sat staring at the phone for a long moment. Liam waited, recognizing the look on his mother's face, the same expression she'd worn when his father left, when the bills piled up, when life forced her to make difficult decisions with no good options. "He knows," she said finally. "I don't know how, but Father McKenna knows what we found. Maybe he's just concerned about church history," Liam offered, though his voice lacked conviction. Sarah looked at her son, this boy who was growing up too fast in a world that seemed determined to steal innocence at every opportunity. She made a decision that would change both their lives. "Pack a bag, Liam. Just essentials, clothes for a few days, anything you can't leave behind." "Mom, what are you doing?" What the nuns should have been able to do 30 years ago. We're leaving, tonight. But where will we go? Sarah looked down at the contents of the box, at the evidence of courage and tragedy that had found its way to them across 3 decades. Vermont. The journal mentioned that Sister Catherine had a cousin there. It's a long shot, but maybe some stories don't end with the cover-up. Maybe some stories get second chances. As they quickly packed their few belongings, Liam couldn't stop thinking about the photograph of the 5 nuns, their faces bright with faith and hope. Somewhere out there, their story was still waiting to be told. And despite the fear that gnawed at his stomach, despite the uncertainty of what lay ahead, he felt something he'd never experienced before, the weight and responsibility of carrying someone else's truth. By midnight, the Henderson house stood empty, its occupants driving north through the Maine darkness, with a metal box full of secrets that had already begun to change the world around them. Behind them, St. Catherine's Church waited silently in the shadows, its walls holding onto their remaining secrets a little tighter, as if sensing that the long-held balance between truth and silence had finally begun to shift. In the rectory, Father McKenna stood at his window, watching the empty street and thinking about phone calls he would need to make, explanations he would need to give, and the delicate work of maintaining a peace that had lasted 30 years. Some responsibilities, he reflected, passed from one guardian to the next, and some secrets belonged not to individuals, but to entire communities. But in a small town in Vermont, an elderly woman would wake the next morning to find 2 strangers on her doorstep, carrying a story that would prove some truths are too powerful to stay buried forever.